You are barely awake in the back hallway of the courthouse at 7:12 in the morning, sitting on a wooden bench that looks like it was designed by someone who believed comfort led directly to moral decline. Your school backpack is leaning against your shoes. Your shirt collar is crooked. Your breakfast was half a banana and the terrifyingly strong coffee smell coming from the clerk's office. Outside the tall windows, the city is still rubbing sleep out of its eyes. But inside the courthouse, the day has already become serious. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Deputies move through the corridor with quiet, practiced weight. Lawyers in dark suits hurry past carrying folders so full they look like they contain the fate of entire families, which, sometimes, they do. A court reporter walks by with the calm face of someone who has heard every possible version of humans making terrible decisions. Somewhere, a printer coughs out documents. Somewhere else, a man in a cheap tie is whispering into his phone like volume alone might change the facts. Then the side door opens. Your parent steps into the hall wearing the black robe. And everything changes. Not dramatically. Not loudly. That is the strange power of it. Nothing explodes. Nobody cheers. Nobody claps. But the entire hallway seems to adjust its posture. The lawyers stop leaning. The deputies look sharper. Even the nervous man with the phone suddenly remembers he has hands and places them respectfully at his sides. Your parent looks at you, gives a tiny nod that means behave, watch, and do not make me regret letting you come here. Then the courtroom doors open. And the room stands. That is your childhood's version of a thunderclap. A whole room of adults rising because your parent has entered. You are young enough to think this is normal and old enough to know it is not. Most children see their parents go to work and answer emails. You see yours walk into a room and turn chaos into order with a robe, a bench, and one sentence. Now rewind 9 years. You arrive in the world already connected to schedules, hearings, emergency motions, and people saying, "Congratulations," followed immediately by, "Also, the docket is impossible." Your first baby gifts are soft blankets, silver rattles, and one tiny stuffed gavel from a lawyer who thinks this is hilarious. Everyone else thinks it is hilarious too, because legal people have a very specific sense of humor and most of it involves paperwork, Latin, and suffering. Your home is not loud in the normal way. It is loud with significance. Case files on the dining table. Legal pads near the phone. Bookshelves carrying volumes so heavy they look like they were printed to punish weak furniture. Your parent reading at night with glasses low on their nose, a pen in hand, and the expression of someone listening to two arguments fight inside their head. Your other parent learns to run the domestic side of life with the precision of a courtroom calendar. Lunches packed. Shoes found. School forms signed. Dinner held warm because a hearing ran long. Birthdays planned around trial weeks. Family vacations negotiated against judicial conferences, sentencing dates, and the mysterious creature known as an emergency injunction, which you do not understand but learn to dislike. In a judge's family, time is not just time. Time is scheduled, continued, objected to, rescheduled, and sometimes taken under advisement. Other kids grow up thinking adults know everything. You grow up knowing adults make arguments. At 4, you know the difference between your parents' home voice and court voice. Home voice says, "Did you brush your teeth?" Court voice says, "Counsel, answer the question." You strongly prefer the first one. At 5, you discover that a gavel is not a toy, even though it is obviously shaped like the most tempting toy ever invented. You are told this once. Firmly. The gavel returns to the desk like a sacred object, and you learn your first lesson about authority. Some things are powerful because people agree not to misuse them. At 6, you begin to understand that your parents' job is not like other jobs. Your friend's mother sells houses. Your classmate's father manages restaurants. Your parent decides whether people can go home. That is a heavy fact to carry in a backpack next to crayons and a permission slip for the zoo. But as a kid, you do not fully process the weight yet. You process the atmosphere. The courthouse smell, paper, polished wood, old carpet, coffee, anxiety, and air conditioning set by someone who apparently wanted witnesses to confess faster. The sound of heels on marble. The click of briefcases. The low voices outside courtroom doors. The way everyone speaks more carefully when they realize who your parent is. The way adults who are loud everywhere else become suddenly polite in chambers. Especially in chambers. Chambers are magical when you are a child. Not sparkly magical. Better. Secret office magical. A private room behind the courtroom where the judge becomes your parent again, but not completely. The robe might hang nearby. The desk is covered with papers. The books look ancient and serious. There are framed certificates, family photos, a coffee mug with a joke only lawyers understand, and a chair where important people sit when they are about to be told something they may not enjoy. You sit on the couch with a juice box, kicking your feet, while adults step in and out speaking in careful tones. To you, it feels like being backstage at Civilization. Out front, the performance is formal. All rise. Objection. Sustained. Overruled. Approach. Behind the door, it is strategy, pressure, judgment, and very tired people trying to make the day keep moving without breaking the rules. That is one of the hidden thrills of being raised by a judge. You see the machinery behind dignity. Other children see law on television and think it is all dramatic speeches, surprise evidence, and attractive attorneys walking quickly down hallways. You learn early that real law is folders, patience, deadlines, whispered negotiations, missing signatures, bad photocopies, careful language, and grown adults pretending not to be scared. And somehow, that makes it more impressive. Because the real thing does not need music. At 7, you start collecting courthouse characters. The deputy who knows every hallway and can spot trouble before trouble has decided what it wants to be. The clerk who can locate a missing file faster than your friends can find their own shoes. The court reporter whose fingers move like machinery and whose face reveals absolutely nothing, even when people say things that would make a statue blink. The bailiff who seems friendly until someone forgets where they are. The old attorney with suspenders who smells like peppermints and wins arguments by looking disappointed. The young attorney who has highlighted everything, rehearsed everything, and still drops a pen when the judge asks a simple question. The prosecutor with tired eyes. The public defender with 3 conversations happening at once. The family lawyer who looks like they have personally absorbed the emotional weather of every divorce in the county. As a kid, you assume every adult has a role, a title, and a reason to be walking fast with paper. Then you visit a friend whose parent works in marketing. There are beanbag chairs. Someone says, "Let's circle back." Nobody stands when anyone enters. You do not know how society is supposed to survive this. Your education is technically normal. You go to school. You learn multiplication. You make shoebox dioramas. You sit through assemblies where the principal talks for so long that even justice itself would have asked for a recess. But your real education starts at home. Lesson 1, the loudest person in the room is often losing. Lesson 2, words matter most when people think they are just talking. Lesson 3, never write anything down unless you are prepared for someone in a suit to read it aloud later. Your parent does not give advice like a motivational speaker. They give advice like someone who has watched tiny choices grow into disasters with exhibit numbers. Tell the truth the first time. Read before you sign. Don't confuse confidence with being right. Anger is expensive. Nothing good happens after someone says, "Trust me, it's technically legal." These are not cute household sayings. They are survival tools. While other families tell children to be nice, yours tells you to be precise. While other families say, use your words, yours adds, and understand that words create consequences. This makes you an unusual child. You are not necessarily better behaved. Let's not invent fiction. You still argue about bedtime. You still lose homework. You still eat cereal directly from the box when nobody is looking. But you develop an early respect for process. You learn that being right is not enough if you cannot explain why. You learn that feelings matter, but facts do not politely vanish when feelings enter the room. You learn that fairness is not everybody getting what they want. Fairness is everybody getting rules they can see. That is a powerful thing to learn before middle school. There is also a style to it. Nobody admits this, but judicial life has style. Not nightclub style. Not celebrity style. Quiet power style. The robe is the obvious part, but that is almost too easy. The real style is in the rituals. The heavy doors. The elevated bench. The seal on the wall. The old portraits of people who look like they disapproved of electricity. The fountain pens. The leather folders. The law books stacked like fortifications. The way a well-run courtroom feels less like an office and more like a ship where everyone knows who is allowed to touch the wheel. Your parent owns very few flashy things. That would be wrong for the role. But the things they do own feel chosen. A good watch. A beautiful pen. Shoes polished without vanity. Reading glasses that somehow make silence sharper. A briefcase that looks like it has carried decisions heavier than groceries. Some families pass down jewelry. Yours passes down restraint. And restraint, when you grow up around it, starts to look unbelievably cool. Because anyone can be loud. Anyone can perform importance. But a judge can enter a room quietly and make 20 people stop speaking. That kind of authority does not need decoration. By 8, you know there are rules about being a judge's kid. Not official rules, exactly. Family rules. Do not brag. Do not repeat names. Do not discuss cases. Do not touch papers on the desk. Do not ask your parent at dinner, did the guy do it, especially when guests are over. Do not say, my parent is the judge, like it is a magic spell that gets you special treatment. And absolutely, under no circumstances, tell a teacher that your parent knows the law, because you are trying to win an argument about chewing gum. You try this once. It does not go well. Your parent hears about it. Court voice appears in the kitchen. You discover that being a judge's child does not mean fewer consequences. It means consequences arrive better written. That is the funny little twist. People assume your life is full of hidden privilege. And yes, there is privilege. There is access. There is respect. There is the strange thrill of seeing your family name on a courthouse door. But there is also surveillance of character. Your parent has spent all day listening to excuses, so yours need to be unusually good or, preferably, absent. I forgot is not a defense. My friend did it too is not persuasive. I didn't think it mattered is the kind of sentence that makes your parent remove their glasses slowly, which is worse than yelling. By 9, you understand that justice is not a superhero costume. It is more like carpentry. Slow. Detailed. Measured. Full of tools. Your parent reads constantly. Not casually. Not with the relaxed softness of someone enjoying a novel by a pool. They read like the page might be hiding a trap. Statutes. Briefs, motions, opinions, transcripts, letters. Margins filled with notes. Pages flagged. Questions written sideways. Coffee reheated 3 times and still forgotten. You see how much invisible labor sits behind one clean decision. The public hears the ruling. You see the hours before it. The reading. The thinking. The weighing. The refusal to be sloppy just because the day is long. This gives you a strange respect for slowness. In a world where everyone wants instant answers, your parents' job teaches you that speed can be rude to the truth. At 10, you begin to notice the power of silence. In court, silence is not empty. It is loaded. A lawyer pauses before answering. A witness looks down. The gallery holds its breath. Your parent waits. No rushing. No rescuing. No filling the space just because humans get uncomfortable when the air asks a question. That silence does work. It pulls honesty out of corners. It makes weak arguments sweat. It gives strong ones room to stand. You start using silence at school, which makes other children deeply suspicious of you. Someone asks if you are mad. You say, "I'm considering your statement." This does not make you popular. But it does make you interesting. By 11, you start seeing how adults collapse under pressure. Not in a cruel way. In a human way. Court is where people arrive when private problems become public records. A business partnership fails. A marriage breaks. A contract goes bad. A teenager makes a reckless choice. A landlord and tenant both feel betrayed. A family cannot agree on what love owes money. A driver made one decision too fast. A company wrote one sentence too vaguely. A person with everything to lose decided the rules were for somebody else. And there your parent sits, not above humanity in the emotional sense, but above the room in the architectural sense, required to hear all of it without becoming tangled in any of it. That is a strange kind of bravery. Not the loud kind. The seated kind. The kind that says, "Bring me the anger, the grief, the lies, the confusion, the panic, the blame, the fear, the paperwork, and the terrible decisions, and I will still try to find the line." You grow up with that image burned into you. Your parent at the bench. Hands folded. Face steady. The room storming below. And order still possible. At 12, ordinary authority starts to look theatrical. A teacher raises their voice and you think, amateur. A coach gives a speech about discipline and you think, decent opening, weak evidence. A principal calls something a serious matter, and you automatically wonder whether the record supports that characterization. This is not always useful. It can make you unbearable. But it is also a gift. You are not easily impressed by volume. You know that real authority does not need to keep reminding people it exists. Real authority asks clear questions. Real authority controls the room without humiliating it. Real authority knows the rules well enough not to hide behind them. Your parent is not perfect. No judge is. You see the exhaustion. The impatience after long days. The way some cases follow them home even when they say they do not. The way one hard sentencing can make the house feel quieter. The way certain family court days seem to drain color from the evening. But that only makes the role seem more serious. Because childhood teaches you an uncomfortable truth early. Important jobs do not always feel good. Sometimes they feel like carrying a scale nobody else can see. By 13, you become fascinated by the robe. Not because it is fancy. It is not. It is black, plain, heavy, and deeply unflattering in a way that seems intentional. That is what makes it powerful. The robe erases fashion. It erases class signals. It erases whether your parent is tired, stylish, irritated, hungry, or secretly thinking about whether there is still leftover pasta at home. The robe says the person matters less than the duty. That idea hits you harder as you get older. Because outside the courthouse, everyone is trying to become more visible. Better clothes. Better photos. Better stories. Better brands. More personality. More proof. More noise. Then your parent puts on a robe that says, "Today is not about me." And somehow that is one of the most elite things you have ever seen. Restraint again. Power that does not need to pose. At 14, your classmates start understanding what your parent does. This changes things. Someone asks if your parent can get their cousin out of a ticket. No. Someone asks if judges know all the police. No. Someone asks if your house has a jail cell. Also no, although your younger sibling once suggested the laundry room could work. Someone asks if your parent has ever slammed the gavel and yelled, "Order." You explain that real court is usually less dramatic and more terrifying, because the scariest thing is not shouting. It is a calm judge asking, "Counsel, do you have legal authority for that position?" You watch a teenage boy who has never read a statute nod as if he understands. You feel ancient. At 15, you get a summer job in the courthouse. Not because anyone hands you power. Absolutely not. If anything, people are harder on you because they know whose kid you are. You do filing. You make copies. You carry boxes. You learn that the courthouse has back stairways, storage rooms, vending machines with suspicious sandwiches, and employees who can survive on coffee and procedural frustration alone. You learn that the clerk's office is the circulatory system of justice. If the judge is the face of authority, the clerks are the people making sure authority does not lose its paperwork and wander into a wall. You learn humility. Fast. Because nothing destroys a child's fantasy of inherited importance like being told to alphabetize files for 4 hours. The first time you misplace a document, a clerk looks at you with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for collapsed governments. You never misplace one again. By the end of that summer, you understand something you never saw from the bench. Justice is not one person in a robe. It is a network of people doing unglamorous things correctly. Scheduling. Scanning. Stamping. Calling. Recording. Unlocking. Organizing. Explaining. Correcting. Waiting. Repeating. The public sees the formal moment. You see the hidden labor. And once you see it, the whole system feels less like marble and more like muscle. At 16, you watch your parent handle a case that makes everyone in the room tense. You are older now, old enough to understand more than you want to. The lawyers are careful. The witnesses are nervous. The family members in the gallery sit stiffly, as if one wrong movement might crack them open. The air in the courtroom feels thick. Even the deputy near the door seems more alert. Your parent listens. That is the part you remember. Not the legal terms. Not the procedural details. The listening. Full attention, without sentimentality. Compassion, without losing the line. Firmness, without cruelty. Questions that make the room narrower and clearer. A ruling delivered in a voice steady enough for everyone to hold on to, even the people who hate the outcome. Afterward, in chambers, your parent is quiet. Not cold. Quiet. You realize then that the robe does not make difficult things easy. It only gives someone the responsibility to face them properly. That changes how you see power. Power is not getting your way. Power is being trusted to decide when nobody can agree. At 17, you begin to appreciate the weird privileges. Not the obvious ones. Not knowing attorneys. Not walking through staff entrances. Not sitting in the judge's chair after hours, which you are still technically not supposed to do, although everyone knows you did it at least once when you were 9. The real privileges are deeper. You were raised inside seriousness. That sounds boring until you realize how rare it is. You grew up with adults who believed words should mean things. Adults who prepared. Adults who could disagree without turning the room into a food fight. Adults who knew that institutions are fragile and must be maintained by people who still care when nobody is watching. You saw argument done as craft. You saw fairness treated as labor. You saw authority tied to duty instead of ego. That is an incredible inheritance. Some children inherit confidence. You inherit judgment. Not always good judgment. You still make terrible decisions sometimes because you are human and, worse, a teenager. But a small judge lives in your head now. Annoying. Persistent. Always asking whether your version of the story includes all relevant facts. This inner judge is terrible at parties. But excellent at saving your life from stupidity. Before sending an angry message, you hear your parents' voice. Is that helpful? Before signing something, you hear your parents' voice. Did you read it? Before joining your friends in a plan that begins with "Don't worry," you hear your parents' voice. Worry. And you do. Just enough. At 18, you finally understand why people treated your parent differently. It was not just status. Status is cheap. People chase it everywhere. This was trust. A judge is a person the community hands its hardest questions to when private negotiation has failed. That is not glamorous in the normal sense. There are no spotlights, no red carpets, no standing ovations, except that one daily ritual when the room rises, and even that is not applause. It is acknowledgement. The role is bigger than the person. Your parent taught you that without ever making a speech about it. Every day, they stood between conflict and consequence. Between anger and procedure. Between accusation and proof. Between what people wanted and what the law allowed. Between the mess of human life and the possibility that rules might still matter. That is a wild thing to grow up beside. Not wild like Vegas. Not wild like oil fields or war stories or storms at sea. Wild in the quietest way. Wild because civilization is much thinner than children think, and you got to watch someone help hold it together before lunch. Years later, someone will ask what it was like being a judge's kid. They will expect you to say it was strict. And yes, it was strict. Of course it was strict. Your parent could detect a weak explanation through 3 walls and a closed door. They will expect you to say it was intimidating. And yes, sometimes it was. There is no casual way to be corrected by someone who can make experienced attorneys forget their own names with one follow-up question. They will expect you to say it was boring. And they will be completely wrong. Because they are imagining the law as paperwork. You remember it as theater with consequences. You remember standing in empty courtrooms after hours, when the benches were vacant and the seal on the wall seemed larger in the quiet. You remember the echo of footsteps in marble halls. The smell of old files. The judge's parking space. The careful knock on the chamber's door. The robe hanging like a shadow with a job. You remember your parent reading at the kitchen table while everyone else slept. You remember clerks laughing in break rooms with the exhausted joy of people keeping the machine alive. You remember lawyers pacing before hearings, rehearsing arguments under their breath like actors before opening night, except the reviews could change someone's life. You remember your parent coming home after a hard day and sitting in the car for a minute before walking inside, leaving the judge somewhere in the driveway so the family could have dinner. You remember learning that fairness is not soft. Fairness has a spine. You remember learning that mercy is not weakness. Mercy has to understand the facts or it becomes vanity. You remember learning that rules are not chains. Good rules are the railings that keep people from falling when emotions push. That kind of childhood changes you. It makes you careful with speech. It makes you allergic to nonsense. It makes you suspicious of easy stories where one person is completely right and the other is completely evil. It makes you notice who is calm under pressure. It makes you respect people who prepare. It makes you understand that dignity is not something adults automatically have. It is something a room can be trained to protect. And yes, it makes ordinary life feel a little loose sometimes. A little sloppy. A little full of people objecting without grounds. Because once you have watched a real courtroom move through a hard morning, once you have seen anger forced into sentences, pain placed under oath, confusion organized into questions, and power restrained by procedure, the world outside starts looking strangely undisciplined. But that is why it was extraordinary to be raised by a judge. Not because your life was easy. Not because you always got special treatment. You did not. If anything, you learned early that having a judge at home meant the rules came with footnotes. It was extraordinary because your childhood gave you a front row seat to order being made. Not imagined. Made. Day after day. Case after case. Question after question. You grew up knowing that truth is not always obvious, fairness is not always simple, and authority, at its best, is service dressed in black. You grew up around people who believed that language could protect the weak, expose the careless, limit the powerful, and give chaos a place to sit down. You grew up with a parent who did not just tell you to think before acting. They showed you an entire building where thinking before acting was the whole point. And before you were old enough to understand statutes, precedent, jurisdiction, or the 1,000 invisible gears inside the legal system, you understood something better. Life is not meant to be ruled by whoever yells first. It is meant to be examined, questioned, balanced, heard, and handled with enough discipline that people can still believe in tomorrow after a terrible day. That is the gift. That is the strange luxury. Not money. Not fame. Not getting to say your parent is the judge, although, let's be honest, that did feel incredible at least a few times. The real luxury was growing up inside a world where seriousness still had honor. Where words had weight. Where adults stood when duty entered the room. Where silence could be stronger than noise. Where a person in a plain black robe could remind everyone that power is not supposed to be wild. It is supposed to be held. And once you have seen that up close, once you have watched your parent walk into a room full of conflict and make even the angriest people speak one at a time, the world never quite shrinks back to ordinary size. That is why it was incredible to be a judge's kid. Because your childhood came with marble hallways, secret doors, heavy books, quiet warnings, sharpened language, impossible questions, and the daily proof that civilization is not automatic. Someone has to protect it. Someone has to read the whole file. Someone has to listen when everyone else is only waiting to talk. Someone has to say yes. Someone has to say no. Someone has to take the heat, hold the line, and make a decision that will still be sitting there after the room empties. And for you, that someone came home at night, took off the robe, asked about your homework, and somehow made the entire idea of adulthood feel larger, steadier, and more serious than other people ever knew. Because before you knew what justice meant, you knew what it sounded like. A door opening. A room rising. A calm voice from the bench. And the whole world, for one brief second, remembering how to behave.